Hello everyone, I'd like to introduce you all to the Lizard King. Don't be a hater, come and watch him flex while he turns our Tyrannosaur into a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's time to answer the phone or you'll be next. He's like Godzilla mixed with a massive alligator. He might even try to eat his own stop-motion animator. With Jurassic World Rebirth out in theaters these days, one could say it's probably a good time to go over what started this entire movie franchise today, I do say. As I finish my clay Spinosaur day, known as Asset 87, so they say. But as I craft away at the Jurassic Park 3 Spinosaurus today, I'll be discussing the differences between the Jurassic Park movie and the book today. So let's go over the classic film from 1993, based off Michael Crichton's novel Jurassic Park, written in 1990, whilst going over the various differences between the novel and the movie, which is probably just about as daunting as that massive pile of dinosaur dung you see in the movie. So we're gonna start things off with what people generally care about the most in this franchise, the dinosaurs. Well, first off, we're gonna start with something that technically isn't a dinosaur, but is something that everybody wanted to see in the movie. Because they fly, and they're one of the most interesting prehistoric beasts out there. But they were sadly not included, and that's the pterosaurs. However, in the novel, there's an entire scene dedicated to the pterosaur enclosure. But this idea was recycled for Jurassic Park 3. In the film, Dennis Nedry is the only one who runs into a Dilophosaurus, whereas in the novel, the visitors encounter the Dilophosaurus inside their paddock on the tour. Then later on, Grant and the kids run into a pair on the river. Other dinosaur species in the novel include Apatosaurus, Microceratops, Othnielia, Styracosaurus, Lochlocephalus, Hypsilophodon, and Myosaurus, but do not appear in the film adaptation. The only hadrosaurs that appear in the first film are Parasaurolophus. Apatosaurus is replaced by Brachiosaurus, and the unspecified hadrosaurs are replaced with Gallimimus. And Stegosaurus only appeared as a test tube label in the movie. Granted, it was slightly misspelled. Basically with the pronunciation of Stegosaurus, not Stegosaurus. And Kylosaurus, a relative of Eulochlocephalus, also gets cut but shows up in Jurassic Park 3. And last but not least, the Compsognathus, which the book contains a lot of scenes of, in which many of the sequences and references were dropped from the film, resulting in some, well, major plot differences. Because of this, the first section of the book was omitted from the film, meaning that all the characters from that section basically never appeared, most notable being Dr. Martin Gutierrez, who plays a supporting role in both novels, that's Jurassic Park and The Lost World. The book's opening chapter describes a young American girl on vacation, on a beach shore in South America, getting attacked by Compsognathus, whilst the parents are just enjoying their lavish lifestyle. This sequence was cut from the original film, but was used later on for the opening in The Lost World, with a British family cruising to Isla Sorna instead of the mainland. The opening for the Jurassic Park movie are scenes alluded to by a bedridden patient in the book's prologue. Therefore, technically both versions open up with a fatal raptor attack on a park worker, however, from different perspectives. The movie opens up with the park warden Robert Muldoon leading the female raptor to the pen. However, chaos shortly ensues, because the raptor proceeds to go crazy, killing one of the Jurassic Park workers, which then leads into the classic line which is often imitated, where the book opens up with a med school graduate taking up a medical practice on the island of Costa Rica, where a helicopter makes an emergency landing through a very bad storm at her hospital, where the victim has lacerations all over his chest and a strange slimy saliva-looking substance all over his wounds, with some shady Jurassic Park worker insisting that it was a construction accident, where the victim just keeps repeating El Raptor to the nurse, and later on she decides to look up the English translation, meaning bird of prey. On top of dropping a vast majority of the Compsognathus dinosaurs dinosaurs, Jurassic Park the movie loses an entire subplot of dinosaurs escaping the island. But in both cases, I think it's safe to say things are a little rocky on Isla Nublar. And John Hammond, the park owner, needs to reassure his scared investors that his crazy dinosaur idea is definitely worth the investment. So he decides to get a group of experts to vet the place. And one could say there's a really big difference here. You see, John Hammond, well, how do I put this politely, is very similar to the CEO from Jurassic World Rebirth. Basically, just a douche. To sum things up briefly, I believe he was blinded by the power of his own creation, and his passion towards the subject made him maybe just a little bit arrogant. However, he does come armed with that old man charm. And then eventually, he does renounce his failed creation. And this redemption is probably why they let him live, at least in the movie. In the novel, he cares about one thing and one thing only, and that's Jurassic Park. Even when his own grandchildren are lost, and for all he knows, dead somewhere, with possibly their entrails hanging out, he only shows what can be described as feigned concern. In fact, Hammond is so megalomaniacal, even with the abundance of chaos going on, he still has plans to open a second park. I think it's safe to say that he takes basically nothing into account that Malcolm has to say about chaos theory, where Malcolm tries to point out again and again the impossibility of a flawless system, and his incapability of taking this seriously ends up being his downfall. So that's the owner. Now we're gonna move on to our experts. Alan Grant is described as a barrel-chested man at the age of 40, and an outdoorsman who hates intellectuals, essentially very similar to Indiana Jones. And a really big difference between the book version and the movie version of this character: in the book, he admires kids because they love dinosaurs just as much as he does, whereas movie Grant is more of a brainy scientist with deep connections to the land and is opposed to children. But by the end of the film, he realizes taking care of another life that is more helpless than his own isn't so terrible after all. Dr. Ali Sadler is basically the same in the book as she is in the movie. However, there is a few big differences between them. Mainly in the book, she is not romantically involved with Alan Grant at all, and is set to marry a guy that she met in college. Now, as for the kids, there's definitely a role reversal here. Tim being the oldest in the book and is into computers, although is still interested in dinosaurs. And his sister Lex is the younger of the two siblings and is a tomboy and is interested in sports. And to put it nicely, in the book, she is pretty much useless. So obviously, in the film adaptation of the book, there is a major role reversal here, with Lex being the older one and good with computers and is actually pretty handy throughout the movie, whereas Tim is the younger one and is a massive dinosaur nerd. Dr. Ian Malcolm definitely was not a prominent character in the book in comparison to the movie. He was definitely more of a serious scientist, as opposed to the guy with all the good one-liners, not to mention a great laugh. In the movie, he gets injured attempting to save the kids, whereas in the novel, he doesn't actually attempt to save the children. He sees the T-Rex escape and, well, reasonably freaks out, and starts running for the welcome station, getting tossed around like a ragdoll in the process. And the wound to his leg during this altercation is ultimately what leads to his death due to infection. In the movie, we get Donald Gennaro plays the role of the blood-sucking lawyer, with throwaway lines and a less than desirable mentality, and suitably meets his demise on the toilet by the jaws of the T-Rex, right after he pees his pants, running in fear, leaving the children behind. Now, in the book, he is still a lawyer, but he is very skeptical of the dinosaur zoo. And one of the biggest differences here between these two characters, movie versus novel, in the novel version, he's a muscular hero with children of his own, and goes back into the park after the T-Rex accident, and helps try to find the children. He also goes one-on-one with a raptor, with nothing more than a handheld weapon and brute strength. He also ends up surviving at the end of the novel, doing justice to lawyer stereotypes everywhere. There's also a character named Ed Regis in the book. This character was eliminated from the movie. However, his facade and traits were passed down to Gennaro. This character is actually a slimy Jurassic Park employee instead of a lawyer. However, he still meets a similar demise. Mr. Arnold is pretty much the same and dies the same, except John Arnold in the novel was changed to Ray Arnold in the film, possibly to avoid confusion with the character John Hammond. Dennis Nedry's character does not really change a lot between the book and the novel. The only real difference between Dennis Nedry in the book and the novel is the way he dies, which happens to be outside of the Jeep by a very large Dilophosaurus. And it should be noted that it's an extremely brutal death in the book, which is the main reason why we get a very different death for this character in the movie, where essentially a tiny Dilophosaurus eats him inside the Jeep. Now on to Dr. Henry Wu, who oversees a majority of the Jurassic Park cloning and is head of the research facility. There's a lot of backstory between him and Hammond that dives into the work history through trial and error, and their constant debates over the safety of the park. He's a key component to breaking down the science aspect throughout the novel. He also plays a part trying to restore power to the island, and winds up being attacked and killed by velociraptors in the visitor center. Whereas in the movie, well, we see him on the tour. Dr. Jerry Harding was the chief of veterinary medicine at the San Diego Zoo before taking the job with Hammond, and was the world's leading expert on avian care. He does end up surviving in the book, but not only that, his daughter is a key component to the lost world. As a vet, he is the only one who can treat Malcolm of his injuries by the T-Rex, and attempts to save Ellie from the raptors by opening up the roof door and letting letting her into the safari lodge. In the movie, he's just the guy trying to figure out what's wrong with the sick Triceratops. So everything is pretty much the same plot-wise up until the tour. In the movie, the park's computer systems are updated. In the novel, it called for 3 Cray XMP supercomputers, used for sequencing the dinosaur DNA. In the movie, Mr. Dino DNA reveals that they use thinking machine supercomputers, specifically 8 connection machines CM5s, as revealed by Dennis Nedry in a Silicon Graphics workstation. In the novel, Dr. Ali Sadler disembarks from the tour vehicle to help a sick Stegosaurus. Now, obviously, in the film, a sick Triceratops was used instead. Donald Gennaro does not go back to the touring cars after attending to the sick Stegosaur, and therefore isn't present for the Tyrannosaurus attack. In the movie, a tropical storm hits the island. Most InGen employees leave, except for John, Game Warden Robert, and Chief System Engineer Ray Arnold. During the storm, Dennis Nedry shuts down the park security, and as a result of this, the Tyrannosaurus Rex breaks through the deactivated electric fence surrounding its pen, attacking Tim and Lex, as well as wounding Ian in the process. The children and Alan only narrowly avoid being eaten, although in the novel, there's still about 20 Jurassic Park staff members on the island, while the rest leave on boat overnight to avoid the storm. Hammond insists that there's no way for dinosaurs to get off the island, and all of them are accounted for. But Grant sees 2 baby raptors playing on deck, where they try to warn the boat and tell them to turn around. But of course, the radio is broken. Oh, but wait, that shouldn't be a problem. Let's just go back to the car to the visitor center. But uh-oh, power outage, so chaos ensues. In the novel, Dr. Grant learns some of the Jurassic Park dinosaurs, including the T-Rex, can only see movement. He makes this discovery by freezing during the Tyrannosaurus attack on the Land Cruisers. That's right, they're not technically Ford Explorers in the novel. Product placement, well, at least it's not as bad as a Snickers wrapper. Anyway, he does later confirm this theory after waking up in a tree from which a hadrosaur is eating. And in the movie, he somehow knows this information before showing up on the island. And unfortunately, well, this is just fake paleontology for movie's sake. Because fun fact, big surprise, Tyrannosaurus Rex could actually see quite well. Either way, he uses this fake paleontology prior knowledge to warn all the other characters to sit still during the Tyrannosaurus attack. Because yes, in this universe, their vision is based off movement, because there's basically no way you're going to get away. In the novel, Tim Murphy is quite skilled at climbing trees, whereas in the film, he doesn't want to start climbing down till the Land Cruiser starts crashing down on them. There's also a junior T-Rex in the novel as well as a bigger one. In the novel, the suspicion that the dinosaurs are breeding on their own is made during the initial tour, when Malcolm questions an apparent population increase displayed on one of the computers, whereas in the film, Grant first discovers this when he comes across a nest of hatched eggs. During the time, him and the kids are stranded in the park. In the novel, the power actually comes back on in a few hours after the T-Rex attacks a few cars. Once Grant and the kids are lost, there's a massive plot section that never happens in the film. While Grant and the kids are making their way back to the visitor center, it's Muldoon and Gennaro who go wrangle up a bunch of dinosaurs, as well as organize some of the staff to help fix fences, where essentially everybody's working as a team to get Jurassic Park back online. Another sequence that happened between Dr. Grant and the kids was being chased by a Tyrannosaurus Rex on an inflatable raft, which was obviously cut from Jurassic Park in 1993. However, this river raft sequence would become the inspiration for the Jurassic Park River Adventure ride at Universal Studios Hollywood. This scene also happens to be included in a video game adaptation for the Sega Genesis, and I'm dating myself on that one. And while obviously in more recent news, Jurassic World Rebirth used it for inspiration for their river raft scene. Long live the invincible raft. If you've seen the movie, you'll get that joke. Now back to the novel where Muldoon tranquilizes the T-Rex. Then Grant and the kids stumble across a pterodactyl enclosure that wasn't on the tour, where once again they are attacked, but escape into a bunker, where they find a gas-powered jeep and are finally able to get moving. In the novel, the only lethal weapons Muldoon was allowed to have was a set of rocket launchers. However, there was some nerve gas that he was unaware of that was found, whereas in the film, he opens up a locker full of shotguns and AR-15s, and he honestly probably had more, because you can clearly see some people with guns in the opening scene. Then the book and the movie coincide, while Arnold attempts to reboot the system and get Jurassic Park back online, leading him to the maintenance shed and a similar death. Ellie and Muldoon go out after him, and just like the movie, they both notice that the raptors have gotten out of their pens. The major change here is Muldoon actually survives the raptor attack by hiding from them in a pipe system. He squeezes his way back to the visitor center, narrowly escaping his own demise. In the novel, Ellie Sattler comes across a velociraptor, which has a genetic mutation allowing it to change the color of its skin. This part was so minor, however, it was basically just left out of the film. In the novel, the survivors take refuge from the velociraptors in the Safari Lodge, or a guest hotel, intended for park future visitors, and a portion of the plot is centered around reactivating the lodge lodge's security system, which include electrified skylights. This sequence is completely cut from the film, replaced with a much smaller scale situation of reactivating the visitor center electronic door locks to keep the raptors out of the control room. During the time of the raptor attack on Ellie, as well as the kitchen raptor attack on the children, the raptors are simultaneously trying to break into the security compound and kill a injured Malcolm, Hammond, Dr. Wu, and Dr. Harding. Wu gets eaten and Malcolm dies from his leg wounds, and Grant saves the day. He actually poisons the raptors by injecting lysine into eggs, then gets the raptors to eat them. No T-Rex entry exploding through the building, eating the raptors and saving the day. Now I'll admit that it's definitely a W for the movie, but with the novel we get the power back onto the park instead. But we get the demise of John Hammond and the raptor nest, which they have been looking for since the beginning of the book. Grant is now determined to see their breeding habits up close and destroy them once and for all. He, Ellie, Muldoon, and Gennaro head into the park to find and gas the nest, and during this time Hammond is just yelling at his employees about all the system's imperfections. Just after cursing out his grandchildren for playing a part in the park's failure, Hammond is frightened by a recorded Tyrannosaurus Rex roar, which causes him to trip, fall down a deep hillside, where he breaks his ankle and then is eaten by Concepnathus. The ultimate creator is killed by his own creation after the power is restored, and he thinks he has proven his point where he has true control over Mother Nature. So those are pretty much all the differences between the Jurassic Park book and the Jurassic Park movie. So here are a list of survivors from the book: Alan Grant, Ellie Sattner, Lex Murphy, Tim Murphy, Donald Gennaro, Robert Muldoon, Dr. Harding, and several workmen. It is implied that Malcolm died, however, he does make a return in the Lost World novel. In the movie, the survivors are Alan Grant, Ellie Sattner, Lex Murphy, Tim Murphy, Ian Malcolm, and John Hammond, as well as Dr. Wu and Dr. Harding, along with all the work crew that left before this chaos ensued. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed part 3 of the Spinosaurus today. If you did, follow what Clay Me has to say. Thanks for sticking around to the very end of the video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new. And that's it from me. Till next time, take it easy.